Now we will understand about salt. Okay, so in salt, it is reported that whenever acid reacts with alkali, it will give you, it will produce a salt. How we can take an example? Okay, so we need to represent an example that how acid reacts with base to give you salt. We can take acid as hydrochloride. When hydrogen chloride will react with a base which is sodium hydroxide, so it will give you a salt. Which type of salt? It will, this hydrogen will react with this hydrogen, giving you 2 hydrogen moles and 1 of oxygen. This is known as water, and giving you the salt, that this chloride will react with sodium, will give you sodium chloride, which is a simple salt. So whenever acid react with alkali, it will give you a solid. Okay, now learning the concept further, which is that whenever acid okay whenever acids react with metal oxide, so it will give you salt plus water. And whenever acid reacts with metal hydroxide, it will also give you the same salt and water. Understand? So this is known as neutralization, which is important to learn. Whenever acid react with metal oxide, as I have given you the example previously, it will form salt and will produce water. Whenever acid react with metal hydroxide, it will also give you the same salt and water. This is known as the neutralization, which can come in exam and in MCQ. So as I've given you the example previously, you need to keep the concept in your mind that whenever acid react with metal oxide, what it will give you, and when it react with metal hydroxide, what it give you. It is the same, but you need to understand this is known as the neutralization. Moving ahead, now the question is coming that how it's neutralized. Okay, it is neutralized as whenever hydrogen oxide, whenever water is produced, as I previously told that the valency of water when an acid combined with alkali, it form neutral, it form a salt and a neutral. The pH of water is 7. So when the pH of water is 7, so it means that it is neutral. Obviously, when it's neutral, now the neutralization has completed. This is the main concept you need to understand for chemistry. Remember another concept, that whenever a soluble salt reacts with solute salt, it will give you plus. Okay, so whenever the soluble salt reacts with solute salt, it will give you insoluble salt and a soluble salt. What does this word soluble means? The substance which can dissolve in solute is known as the soluble salt, and the solute is the one which in which the soluble is dissolved is known as solute salt, which will combine, which will react to give you an insoluble salt and a soluble salt. Now how can we represent it? By giving lead nitric acid, which is a soluble salt obviously, and a sodium sulfate, which is a solute salt in which we have dissolved this, will give us lead sulfate, which is insoluble, and 2 moles of sodium nitrate, which is soluble salt. You need to memorize that this is the soluble salt, it is insoluble, it is solute salt, and it is also a soluble salt. Okay, so it is in the form of aqueous. Aqueous means the watery. I've also explained in my previous videos. The link is in the description. It is a solid, and okay, and it is also a solid. Okay, you need to remember this. Sorry, it's not a solid, it's also an aqueous. That's why it's soluble. Okay, so moving ahead, we have already studied that whenever cation, which is having the sign of positive, reacts with anion, which is having the negative sign, will form ionic compound. In our previous video, I have briefly described about what are the properties of ionic compounds, so kindly visit it. It would be very helpful for you in your exams. Whenever cation reacts with anion, it forms an ionic compound. Okay, and we are talking about salt, that salts are mainly soluble in water, okay, and is also having the high melting point and boiling point. Your question is that why salt is having high melting and boiling point? This is because they are ionic compounds. What are ionic compounds? Go and watch out the previous video so that you can understand why ionic compounds have high melting and boiling point. Moving ahead, that because of charges, they dissolve in water. Obviously, it would be a question that why it dissolve in water. It can be a question. So the answer is because of charges, they dissolve in water. For example, we have took the water, hydrogen positive, hydroxide negative, sodium positive, chlorine negative. Okay, so with a negative, a positive will react. With a positive, a negative will react. So this will become giving hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide. So this is how the salt can dissolve in the water. Moving ahead, All soluble okay, what are the soluble salts? What are the soluble salts? These are all potassium, nitrate, all chlorides are soluble except the silver chloride, the lead chloride, and the mercury chloride. Okay, mercury chloride. These three are not soluble. Above these three, all potassium, sodium, and nitrate are, and also chlorides are soluble in water. Okay. And also all sulfate are soluble. Sulfates are soluble except calcium sulfate, lead sulfate, and barium sulfate. Okay, so these are the soluble salts except these three and except these three. All are soluble. What about insoluble one? Okay, moving ahead. There are some insoluble salts in water which cannot dissolve in water. These are all carbonates. Written down. All carbonates are insoluble in water except, okay, means there are some carbonates which can dissolve in water, which are known as potassium carbonate, sodium carbonate, and ammonia carbonate. So potassium carbonate, sodium carbonate, and ammonia carbonate are soluble in water except other all carbonates. Means all carbonates are insoluble in water above these three. You need to memorize that which are soluble and which are not soluble. This can help you extremely in your MCQs. However, it will also help out in your theory and in your ATP, which is known as the alternative to practical. I hope so that this would be very helpful for your MCQs. So I hope so that you have understand that what I taught you today. And as you know that the properties of alkali are that they are slippery to touch, they are caustic to touch. If alkali are strong, they can cut the skin. It is for the precaution. It is a bitter and gives hydroxide ion when dissolved in water, as we have learned, used for cleaning purpose as it dissolves oil and dirt stains. Okay, from now these are all overall the properties of salt, and you need to learn that why these types of questions came, that mostly the salt are soluble in water, but how much are not soluble or insoluble you need to memorize, otherwise it can never be helpful. The MCQs will be complicated for you. I hope so that you enjoy the video and understand the concept. If still you have any problem, just comment below.